This call is now being recorded.
Okay, we welcome you to the second day of the webinar. Over to Mary ma'am. Mary ma'am, your introduction to the chief guest by Mary ma'am. Over to Mary ma'am.
Welcome.
Thank you, Rama.
Well,
Thank you so
Thank
much,
you.
Rama. It's lovely to be here. So, welcome aboard the ship of the Department of English, Dr. MGR University. And I'm thrilled this morning to welcome all the dignitaries, faculty from different regions and clients, dear students, and our eminent resource person, Professor Tanmoy, to this webinar. Thank God that all of us are keeping safe in these perilous times. Even though all around is chaos and confusion, the academic fraternity still trudge along tirelessly, conducting webinars and guest lectures galore digitally. The online portal is a boon for these endeavors. I think here itself lies the crux of postmodern theory, which is in vogue in literature of today. That an eminent resource person, Professor Tanmoy Puttatunda, is going to enlighten us today about postmodern theory in vogue, and he's going to tell us about the great writers of postmodern theory and the great theorists. I think Carlos Jung, when I read Carlos Jung in his Modern Man in Search of a Soul, was paving the way to postmodern theorists and writers. And I think the baton was then passed on to Jacques Derrida, Jean-Francois Lyotard, Michael Foucault, Soren Kierkegaard, and Friedrich Nietzsche. So all these writers and theorists, they are the backbone of postmodern theory and literature. And also, if I remember, the dismal, grim nature of life as portrayed by postmodern writers like Thomas Pynchon and Kurt Vonnegut and Samuel Beckett, all make us ponder on the flux and change and the desperate overtures of humankind in search for meaning in a dark world. I welcome our eminent speaker, Professor Tanmoy Puttatunda, once again from the land of Odisha, who's going to take us through this journey of comprehending postmodern theorists and literature in vogue today. Please lend in your ears, dear students and faculty, ears and minds, and enjoy this session. I end with a quote from Friedrich Nietzsche. And those who were seen dancing were thought to be insane by those who could not hear the music. So let us hear the music. Enjoy yourself. Welcome, Tanmoy.
thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you, Mary ma'am, for that wonderful uh, welcome address. So we are very interesting to hear more from the chief guest. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Lama.
I call upon Ms. Sashireka to welcome the chief guest.
Happy morning, everyone. Welcome to a two-day national webinar on postmodern philosophy and literature. I am profusely overjoyed to take the opportunity to introduce our chief guest of today. Mr. Tanmay Puttatunda is an assistant professor of English in the School of Languages, KIIT University. He is also a doctoral candidate in the Department of English, Vishwabharati Santiniketan, and prior to joining KIIT University, he served as the head of the Department of English Language and Literature, Adamas University, Kolkata. He is also taught in Pirap Ganguly College, PG English, and as well as the Belgoria, Kolkata as a teaching faculty and worked as an instructor in the spoken English course conducted by Vishwa Bharati. Mr. Tanmay Puttarunda was awarded the UGC Junior Research Fellowship. He has presented papers in national and international conference and published research papers in prestigious academic journals and books. His research interests include urban studies and literature, representation of cities, literary theories and criticism, post-colonial and postmodern literatures, Indian literature in English, travel literature, popular literature, cultural studies, film studies, and literature visual arts. He is an expert in literature and very much suitable for today's webinar. Thank you for giving this opportunity. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Shashi ma'am. Now over to ma'am. So over to sir.
Oh, thank you. Is the audio okay?
Fine, sir. Fine, sir.
Okay.
Very
Okay.
clear.
Okay, okay. So welcome everybody, and so today's topic, that we'll be discussing is of course postmodernism. Now, it is of course a topic which I think those who are familiar with it would know. It's very difficult to understand, let alone 1 hour or 1.5 hour, or even a lifetime is possibly is not enough to understand it. It's so difficult and so difficult to pinpoint and define. But then again, we cannot stop our, of course, I mean, intellectual endeavors for that. We have to understand. We have to kind of discuss it. So today, I assume that most of the participants in this forum will be students. So I have shaped my presentation accordingly, and I would just hope that I will be able to give you the basic aspects of basic idea about the postmodern philosophy, and also touch upon a few aspects of postmodern literature. So just before I begin my presentation, just I mean, one disclaimer that see, as I have already said, it's a broad movement. Okay, so the presentation, it is limited to some postmodern philosophies, the things which have influenced postmodernism, and then again, of course, the major intellectual figures. Whenever we think about postmodernism, we remember a few intellectual figures. So we will be discussing about them, and of course, then it is about postmodern literature, certain aspects of postmodern literature. But just remember that postmodernism is not exclusively a literary movement. Architecture, popular arts, in fact, those more than literature, those are the mediums where I mean, it actually I mean, played a huge part. So, but of course, for the lack of time, and also we cannot discuss everything on a single platform. So therefore, I have strictly limited my discussion to as per the title of the presentation. It's philosophies and literature. Okay, but yes, I will be mentioning a few aspects here and there in the presentation. So without much ado, I'll be presenting my screen. So I'll be just closing down my video, if that is okay, because just to make sure that the slide transition is smooth, and to save the bandwidth. Okay, thank you. So I'll be presenting my screen here. So just a second. Yeah. Is the screen visible?
Yes, sir, it's visible.
Okay. Thank you. So as you can see, the title of the presentation is this: Postmodern Philosophy and Literature. Okay, and I have given a kind of tentative content before the presentation. So if you see it, you'll see that we begin with the term postmodernism, the applications of the term rather, and then we'll be talking about precursors to postmodernism, the context, the aspects that actually kind of I mean, provided the platform for this movement to emerge. Then we'll be talking about some basic aspects of postmodernism, some intellectual figures, some literary techniques and example, and followed by this, we'll be talking about critique of postmodernism, the way we can kind of, I mean, have a critique of postmodernism, and we'll end with a fundamental question: that is postmodernism dead? In other words, is it still relevant in today's world? So that is something we'll discuss. So this is a kind of tentative structure of this presentation that I'll be following here. So so begin with postmodernism is of course a movement which kind of, it's very difficult to once again pinpoint a particular time, but tentatively critics kind of agree that it would be around 1960s. Okay, 1960s 70s is the time when basically it arose. So it's basically a broad movement that has developed in the mid to late 20th century, and it encompasses philosophy, arts, architecture, criticism, everything. Okay, and it basically derives its identity, derives its concept from its dissociation, or a break from modernism, a departure from modernism. Then, although this idea is contested, we'll explore that during the course of this presentation. Now, the term also it has been more generally applied to describe a historical era, okay, that followed after a modern era. Okay, so if you talk about the history of the term, it's interesting to note that the term itself, of course, not in the present sense of the term, but it actually first time appeared as early as 1870. Okay, so I mean, there's a person called Watkins Chapman, okay, who talked about while talking about painting, he mentioned this style. Okay, but then again, for the modern usage, okay, for a more modern usage, we are primarily indebted to as I said, 60s and 70s, when this term get prominence, and during the 1980s it just skyrocketed. So on your screen, you're basically seeing the several senses in which this particular term is used. Okay, so one aspect is after modernism. Okay, post as in after, and modernism. So it basically means that whatever the natural extensions and patience and problems those were implicit in modernism, postmodernism is perhaps just an extension of that. Okay, the second meaning would be contra-modernism, which means subverting, contesting, or resisting tenets of modernism. So postmodernism as a response to modernism. Okay, the third aspect would be just a historical era. Okay, so just a chronological marker. All right, next would be as an artistic and stylistic eclecticism. So basically, you talk about art, aesthetics, philosophy, everything, architecture, painting, everything. So it refers to that. And lastly, of course, it's a broad cultural thing. It's a global village phenomena which talks about globalization of cultures, races, images, capital, products. Now, each of these categories, each of these sense is hugely loaded. Okay, and there are so many diversity, and there are so many senses of postmodernism, and some of them are actually contradictory to each other. So that is what makes postmodernism so difficult to define. Okay, now let's talk about the things that actually laid the groundwork for postmodernism. Now, we're just discussing that whether modernism is, postmodernism is a break from modernism, or is it just an extension of it? Okay, and here we have primarily focused on the early half of the 20th century. Okay, so we can see the if we trace the roots of postmodernism. Okay, not just to early half of the 21st century, but as subsequently we will show in this presentation, that we can go as as far as maybe 18th century, or even beyond that perhaps. Okay, but here primarily some social, political, and cultural, philosophical stuff, which you can say that those were responsible, those kind of provided the impetus for postmodernism in a way. So first would be the World War, because not just the Second World War, but as early as the First World War itself, because the world had not seen anything like that before. Okay, all this talk about existentialism, or what is our essence. Okay, what does existence mean? All these things, questions started to arise from the World War. All right, so disillusionment with science, moving away from the 19th century confidence, like Victorian confidence, that science can achieve, so many stuff. Although in Victorian era also we have, a skepticism, but moving away from that, this disillusionment with science, and World War is, of course, one of the prime example that what science had done. Okay, so the misuse of science. Okay, that is something we can. Sense here. Also, some general issues like poverty and exploitation that has been there, since time immemorial, and that's continued to haunt our world. And of course, people like Marx, Freud with his psychoanalysis, we come to know about a different kind of realism, psychological realism. So which once again influenced the stream of consciousness techniques in the in modernism. Then of course we have Picasso, Kafka, Brace, Joyce, Eliot, so all kinds of experimentation in art and literature. Okay, that also serves as a fitting background for postmodernism. And then lastly, of course, the proponents of existentialism, Kierkegaard, Heidegger, Nietzsche, who basically once again Ma'am was talking about Nietzsche while before. So they kind of once again provided the much needed impetus that kind of shaped postmodernism. So we well, this we always look for definition, right? I mean, whenever we try to learn something, we look for a definition because it helps us to understand it. Our brain works in a way that if until and unless we fit something into a structure, we are really restless. Okay, and postmodernism actually plays with that. Okay, and that is a first rule of postmodernism, that you do not define it. Of course, if you if you search, if you consult other books, there are lots of definition of postmodernism that has been given by several critics. But then again, each study about those definitions reveals that those are inadequate, and those actually do not serve to properly describe postmodernism. It's so difficult. Okay, so the first rule of postmodernism is, you do not define it. Okay, so just to elaborate on this point, here is a postmodern perspective. Okay, now see, this is a very popular image, which is usually, said almost half jokingly about postmodernism. So if you see, go to the pre-modern era, it says because God put it there, and that's the way it has always been. Okay, modern era says onwards and upwards with inevitable progress. Okay, and if you come to postmodernism, well, it's just gibberish. It doesn't make any sense. Okay, that kind of fittingly summarizes postmodernism in a way. But does that mean that we are not going to discuss about it? We will, of course. Okay, we'll talk about. We'll still try to try and make some sense of this madness of postmodernism. So in an attempt to do so, the first, I think the starting point, the proper starting point would be Brian McHale. Okay, and he's there to help us to start. Okay, so he says that modernism to postmodernism, this shift is an epistemological towards an ontological dominant. So from epistemological to ontological. So well, here we are, the first encounter with some terms. So so epistemology is, of course, the philosophy of study of nature, origin, and the limits of human knowledge. Okay, so it talks about human knowledge. So there is a knowledge out there, and you can pursue that. Ontology, on the other hand, it's once again a branch of philosophy, of course, that studies the concepts such as existence, being, becoming, reality, okay, and so on and so on and so forth. So it basically includes the questions of how entities are grouped into basic categories, and which of these entities exist on the post-fundamental level. So basically, from a pursuit of knowledge and stuff, we are onto something where the being, becoming, reality, those itself come into question. Okay, and the following slides will elaborate on these points, of course. And so the first thing that is very crucial here is, of course, relativity. Okay, relativism rather. So now, what is so special about this slide is that, because see, we often associate science with objective reality. 2 + 2 is equal to always 4 and not 5. Okay, that is what science tells us. And on the other hand, we have always associated art, literature, philosophy with abstract concepts, to put it simply. To put it, it's a general remark, of course, but once again. So what changed with especially with Einstein is that we now know that even science, that does not give you at any universal concept. Okay, so whatever things that science says, it's not universal. You cannot apply it anywhere and everywhere. We'll be talking about Lyotard and how he critiques science later on, so we'll see that. But Einstein was the first one who basically brought this to light, and he talks about relativity, quantum mechanics, and we know that even Newton could be wrong. We know that time could be relative. Okay, matter and energy are one. Light can be both particle as well as wave. So all these kind of radical thoughts in science that kind of emerged. Okay, and that gave way for that kind of made the way for rather the relativism in social and cultural discourse as well. The image that you can see on the right side of your screen is an image of a mirror. Okay, and on that there's a poster kind of a thing which says that reflections in this mirror may be distorted by socially constructed ideas of beauty. So what does it mean? What does it mean? This means that even concepts such as beauty, that can be subjective. Okay, so we certainly each of us have some ideas about beauty. Okay, those of you who remember that the entire this Barbie phenomena, that which popular as well as controversial, this how it shaped the idea of female beauty at one point in time. If you go back in time in India or elsewhere, the concept of beauty is totally different from today's era. Even now, if you go to different worlds, different society, you will see that the concept of beauty is different. So there is no universal truth. There is no absolute truth. Okay, truth just like in this case beauty are just social constructs which depend on race, class, gender, power, and a host of other factors. Okay, so yeah, that is something which kind of was propagated. So therefore, this is the first conclusion that possibly perhaps we can draw, which is postmodernism is where all truth is relative. Okay, but then again, it qualifies that by that saying that except this statement. Now, isn't there isn't it a paradox that all truth, when you say that all truth is relative, then this statement that we are making isn't itself is a paradox? Are not we making an universal statement? So we'll come to that in the critique of postmodernism. So well, let's go back to enlightenment for a while. Okay, now see, postmodernism often it basically takes shape from the fact that the project of enlightenment it is a failure, it's dead. Okay, so what are these? Okay, so it basically has 4 pillars. First of all, it kind of assumes that that truth is basically an independent construct and it is absolute. So it is out there, and if you can kind of pursue it, then you will have knowledge. So knowledge is basically an objective and unquestionable perception of truth. Okay, and what will help you in that? What will help you in pursuing in the pursuit of knowledge? Reason, rationality. Okay, so reason is basically it justifies and it can lead you to knowledge. Okay, and if you follow all these 3 things, then you will have progress. Okay, a linear a kind of one-dimensional progress that will only go ahead. Okay, now these are the things that will bring into that will be brought into question, okay, later on. Now, to begin with, let's talk about certain intellectual figures. Now, this is the funny thing with actually 18th century and Enlightenment, that even people who were there, they actually deconstructed in a way the idea of enlightenment and rationality. You talk about fictions. If you talk about Gulliver's Travels, like Tom Jones, they basically play with reality, play with rationality. Okay, so the first, we often, credit, postmodernism is often credited with creation of metafiction. Okay, but once again, possibly these are, something like Tristram Shandy's, wonderful example of metafiction. So, if you go back at the, in the philosophical discourse, we'll see that Hegel, once again, I'm sure all of you are familiar with the name. So he basically says that language or thought, okay, they don't relate to the world directly. Okay, so once again, remember, these are not exact quotation from Hegel, but unless and until I'm putting any quotation mark, it's just a kind of toned down, a simplified form of whatever they have said. Okay, so so Hegel brought this out for the first time, that look, language and thought, they do not really relate to the world that is there. Okay, directly. So there is no direct link but a complex mix of sensations. Now, this is a very complex idea. Okay, so let's just pause a while and try to understand it. Now, let's just say you are at this time you are looking at this screen, okay, and possibly listening to me. Now, you can say that, okay, well, all right, you can see the picture of Hegel there. There are some writings along with it, but our perception, Hegel would say that our perception is not as simplistic as that. Okay, so for example, when you are looking at your screen, you are using now, for example, Google Meet. Okay, so you are having that perhaps this this all those buttons, all those, I mean, your browser, your laptops, and all those peripheral stuff. Maybe some, you are feeling hungry or sleepy, maybe those things come into play. Maybe you are in a quiet environment or in a noisy environment. So all of these things, they kind of play a part in your perception. Okay, so what you have is not, when you say that, okay, you are listening, you are watching this screen, and you are listening to this whatever I'm saying, it is not as simple as an equation as that. Okay, so what we have is, between us and these objects, we have concepts. Okay, concepts of something, concepts of the screen, concepts of a picture, concepts of this postmodernism. So everything will kind of determine that. All right, so this will be of course elaborated further, and once again, another enlightenment figure, if we talk about him, Kant actually says, Immanuel Kant, that all these things are nothing but synthesis of the manifold. So there are many things, and it is what we perceive, it's just a synthesis of these things. And also he says, reason is the origin of certain concepts and principles. Remember, he doesn't say reality, he says concepts and principles. So the question is there a I mean, gap between reality, or what we perceive as reality, and concepts, our perception of reality? Okay, so once again, this will be further taken up by Russell, and Bertrand Russell, who will say with his theory of description, that description does not simply connect us to an object in the world. Okay, and same is true for names. We'll be talking about signifier and signifieds, but names are just that. Okay, they are basically disguised descriptions. Okay, we name certain things in order to as per our concept of that particular thing. Okay, so always between us and the world, okay, between us and our perception, there are always concepts. Okay, so this is once again so this idea is not new. These I mean, the roots of this idea was already there, and we can trace I mean, back till I mean, enlightenment. Actually, we can trace it even I mean, farther, but as of now, let's just stick to enlightenment and beyond that. So another important figure would be Heidegger. Okay, who I mean, brought into question the very existence. Okay, and he considers the existence as hermeneutical, that is, as a matter of self-perception. Okay, so I mean, it's according to our self-perception that we perceive our existence. Okay, and he's a huge figure, of course. There are I mean, hermeneutics is a broad I mean, discussion, but for our discussion as of now, I have kind of limited this to this point, I mean, this point. So Nietzsche is another figure who would say that reason is just a tool for weakling, and intellect is for the weak. Because, and a very interesting statement that he makes, that intellect, the impulse of truth, prompts us to invent causes for effects. So the other way around, we invent causes for effects, and then we forget that we invented the cause. Okay, and we focus on the effects. So basically, I mean, they are playing with this our linear idea of reality. So and since we are talking about reality, if we just fast forward maybe around 100 years or so, we have Baudrillard, okay, who will be talking about hyper reality. So it is basically an inability of consciousness to distinguish reality from a simulation of reality, especially in technologically advanced postmodern societies. So what is simulation? Simulacra, all those concepts are there associated with it. So whatever we perceive now, okay, is it reality? okay, or is it just once again our perception, the things, the way we are perceiving it. And this gets more complicated with technological advancement. All right, now we have spoken for these theories for a while. Let's just go back to something which is a bit simpler and fun. Now let's, for example, is let me ask you this question, that is Pokemon real? I'm sure all of you are familiar with this figure. Okay, and is Pokemon real? That is that is the fundamental question. Now see, as Bodula was saying, that with this interaction of technology, technology mediated reality is something which is something we haven't really seen before. So all these discourses, all these debates about reality gets further complicated when we come to this technology mediated reality. Now I think all of you remember all those games, right? There's like there's if when you're talking about Pokemon, there's this game called Pokemon Go. And I remember one day I was sitting at home, and my one of my friends came, and he said that, "Oh, okay, no, there's a Pokemon in your house." And I said, "What?" He said, "No, Pokemon." So I said, "Okay." So he just opened the camera, and it's basically augmented. So augmented reality. You basically merge reality with something which is non-real, okay, with something which is digital. Okay, Pokemon Go was a fantastic example of that. These days, of course, you have other games as well, and which basically use makes use of augmented reality. Of course, those are sometimes can be very dangerous. So but once again, that's beside the point. But our concepts of reality, this is how has taken a completely different turn with the advancement in technology. Suppose let's just for example take the example of a Google map. When we are traveling, rather than looking at the street, the real streets, the shops or other landmarks, we often surf Google map. Okay, so we perceive reality, okay, in reference to a point in the screen, right? So which one is more real, the reality outside, or the Google map at that point in time? Okay, maybe at that point in time, if you are taking the help of a Google map, that is more real in a way. Okay, because we are immersed in that, we are not bothering about, because you all know that unless we perceive something, it is not real. Okay, so in order for something to exist, you have to perceive it. Okay, so Google map would be another example for that. So what is this? But it is not once again reality in the general sense of the term. So Baudrillard say, I give you a new term for that. So it's hyper real. Okay, so when we are talking about Pokemon, maybe we can say that it may not be real in the in that sense of the term, but it can be hyper real. Okay, so this is a term which Baudrillard uses. So yeah, so this is how so far we have talked about reality, okay, and our concepts of reality and how that can be problematized. And we have seen that how with the advancement of technology, okay, our idea of reality has taken a completely different turn altogether. Okay, so next important point that we'll be discussing here is the idea of the self. Okay, so one aspect is reality, the second aspect is self. Now self is something which we think that is unquestionable. Okay, the idea of the self, because I think therefore I am, as Descartes had said. Okay, so what Descartes, once again going back to our Enlightenment philosophy, Descartes says that that the one way of knowing the truth is to doubt everything. So doubt everything that you can. Okay, and at the end of it you can find knowledge. Okay, so with his method of doubts, he finds at this conclusion that it is the self which is unquestionable. All right, so the cogito, that is I think therefore I am. So I am essentially a thing that thinks. Okay, so nothing can kind of be, nothing can come between that. Okay, because if I don't exist, if myself don't exist, it doesn't exist, then who is thinking? Okay, so therefore he came to the conclusion that with his method of doubt, that self is possibly the ultimate truth in this world. Okay, so sounds kind of convincing, but the postmodernists would say that no, hang on, that can be questioned as well. So postmodernists took this thing, this a step further, and they challenged the very idea of the self. Okay, so they would say that, look, it's a mistake to think of your own mind as the center of your world or your knowledge of it. Okay, you make use of concepts while thinking about yourself. So if I ask you now that, suppose, just give me your introduction, who are you? Okay, so actually, if we had time, it would have been great, had there's been an interactive session, but unfortunately, if we go there, then the time will be taken up. So I'll be basically answering my own question that way. So who are you? So if you describe, for example, ma'am was describing me that who am I? I work there, I am from here. Okay, so once again, each of these are references, okay, which once again depends on other references. Let me just just clarify, let me just clear this. Suppose if I am, say, an assistant professor. Now, in order to say who I am, I have to say, well, I'm an assistant professor. Now, what is an assistant professor? Okay, what does it do? What is teaching? Okay, what do we teach? So in a way, if you just go by that, we'll see that our existence is not independent of other stuff around us. In other words, our existence depends on, quote unquote, other realities around us. So if we can question those realities, okay, then can ourselves stand independently of that? Okay, we can't. Because suppose if there is nobody there around you, if there is, suppose, in a world suddenly nobody is there, okay, you are alone in the world, can you really prove your existence? Can you prove that you exist? Okay, that is a fundamental question that has often come up several philosophical discussions. So once again, your relation to yourself, okay, so your relation and to what you think you are is mediated by your concepts. Suppose if you're a student, your idea of student. If you're a friend of somebody, your idea of friend. If you are say a son or daughter of somebody, then your idea of son and daughter. So all these things come together. Okay, your language, your society, your concepts and your language. Okay, and it is your society that gives you all these things. All right, so how a student should behave, how a teacher should behave, how say a child should behave. Okay, all these things are there in the society, and our idea of us, okay, is actually mediated by that. So you may think that, okay, I like this kind of music, you may think that, well, I like this kind of movies, but in effect, actually, it is you have been programmed, you have been socially programmed. Okay, so it is not something which comes from your essence, but it's actually the things around you, maybe your family, maybe your friends, maybe the role models that you like, and everything come together to give you this idea of yourself. Okay, so who am I is once again a fundamental question, okay, that can be brought into question. So from our questioning reality to questioning self. Okay, postmodernism is all about dismantling all structures. Okay, and once again, this is in this context, I thought this artwork would be absolutely relevant. Barbara Kruger, who kind of made this, who said that I shop, therefore I am. So now you can understand it's of course an indirect take on the saying that cogito ergo sum, I think therefore I am. So she was basically trying to imply consumerism, okay, rather than human agency. That is what define our identity. Now, this is one way of looking at it. You can also say other stuff like I sleep, therefore I am. I eat, therefore I am. I do these things, therefore I am. So all these things, our idea of ourself, okay, depends on other stuff. Okay, so that is something which was a fundamental shift from the previous strata of thinking, philosophies that we observe in postmodernism. So so we have talked about reality, we have talked about self. Okay, now let's come to another fundamental aspect, which is language. Okay. Now, well, once again, I'm sure you are, I mean, familiar with the Saussure, and who basically, talks about the structure of language. He is of course, proponent of structuralism, and he talked about. He says that the structure of language comes from the human mind. Okay, language is not something which is there. It is not something which was there. It is not something which is given. Okay, it is us, the human beings, who have kind of made it. Okay, so lang is basically, it refers to the set of rules, of a particular language. On the other hand, parole or speech, that refers to the concrete instances of the use of the lang. Okay, so once again, this is a structural concept. I'm not going into that in detail as of now. So what we come to, is this, that signs, therefore. Okay, so what are signs? It says language is basically a set of signs. Okay, which means signifier and signified. So when you say, suppose you are driving, okay, and you see a sign, okay, say a U kind of turn, it doesn't say that you can take a U-turn here. It doesn't say that. It doesn't spell that out. It's just a sign. Okay, when you say parking, P and with a cross, you know that, okay, we're not supposed to park here. It doesn't say, it doesn't require to say that, that parking is not allowed. Okay, so language is something, where all these are but signs. A, for example, all the letters that we have in our alphabet, they are just signs. Okay, if you are familiar with it, well, you know what it means. If you are not familiar with it, those just some random signs they don't make any sense to you. Okay, so now, so this is how this works. First of all, so how do you know that this is a book? Okay, forget about you. Even a child, who is yet to go to school or yet to read a book, knows perhaps that this is a book. So how does that happen? It happens because of, once again, the society, because the child has heard, okay, others saying that this is a book. Okay, and we identify it how? Because we know that, okay, a book should be something which which should be this, there will be a cover page, there will be some pages within it, and this is how it will look. Okay, so this looks like a book, so therefore it is a book. Okay, so this BOOK, these 4 letters, okay, they refer to this concrete object, this concrete idea of book. Okay, so once again, if I say, is this a book, could this be a book? Okay, you would immediately protest. Okay, why? Because once again, this idea of book, okay, does not match with the idea of this object, which is a laptop. Okay, so once again, but the point here is that no matter what we say, our idea of these objects, okay, and the signifier, okay, the name that we call it by, is the relation kind of say natural. Okay, suppose in other languages there would be some other meanings of book. So if I do not know that language, those words won't be making any sense to me. Okay, so this is where this gap between signifier and signified, that opens up. Okay, let me just simplify this again. Suppose once again, there's a famous saying that my love is like a red rose. So why is it that only red rose will be equal to love and not any other, like suppose a black rose maybe? Okay, because it is the custom, because of several usage, we have been so familiar with this use that now red rose automatically stands for love. Okay, so this is how this works. Even signified and signifieds, okay, they are not natural, they are not given. Okay, it's a product of activities of human being. Okay, and since it's man-made or human-made, okay, it can be fashioned. All right, so this is what this is what gets more complicated when you come to abstract ideas like friendship, love, happiness, fear, duty, fame, law, religion, wisdom, courage. Can you define this? Can you give me a definition of, say, wisdom? Can you give me a definition of anger? Okay, it takes different form, don't they? Okay, so so this is how things get more complicated when you go to abstract ideas. All right, so and here where once again one of the major proponent of postmodernism, Jacques Derrida, okay, he comes in. And he would say that language, that everything is text. That's the first thing he says. Everything we can see is texts. Okay, so there is nothing outside the text, which means that we can basically try and read and interpret everything that we can see. Okay, so language is basically a system of differences. I'm going to explain that. Now, all words must be explained only in terms of their relationship to the various systems in which they take part. Suppose, take for example, a dictionary. Okay, say an English to English dictionary. Suppose you're looking for a meaning of a particular word. Now we'll see that that particular word refers to other words in that dictionary. And those words, once again, refer to, in order to explain them, refers to other words in the dictionary. And this goes on and on. Okay, so basically it's a dictionary is just an endless wave of significations. It just, each word just continues to refers to other. Okay, and when you search internet, you'll see that suppose you open Wikipedia, there'll be several hyperlinks. So within a particular kind of line, you will click on that, it will take you to another page. Perhaps that page will take you to another page. Okay, so this is how meanings are constructed. It just refers, it doesn't give you any sacrosanct truth. Okay, it basically refers to each other. Okay, in a system. That's what it does. So therefore, Derrida would say, so the actual meaning, therefore, it just gets deferred. Okay, pushed away, and that's what he called deference or difference. Okay, and just to explain that, for example, if you use the term red, okay, why does this word red exist? Because I need to distinguish that from other colors like green, like yellow, blue. Okay, so I call something red just to distinguish it from other stuff. Okay, you have a name because you need to be distinguished from others. Suppose nobody, as I was saying, giving you the example, suppose there is nobody in the world. Would you need a name? Would that even matter? It won't. Okay, so the name, this process of naming is basically a process of distinguishing. Okay, so once again, it depends on other objects, because if you want to distinguish something from something, then you need something to differentiate. Okay, so once again, the definition of red, okay, the identity of red will depend on other colors. If there are no other colors, then red would have been invalid. Okay, light and darkness, if darkness wasn't there, light would have been meaningless. Okay, because it would have been just light, okay, and nothing else. So so this is how meanings is constructed. So therefore, this opening of deconstruction, what it does is it basically looks at the arbitrary relationship between the signifier and the signified, what we say and what we mean. Okay, so this is the gap, and actually postmodernism is all about a focus on the signifier, because signified can be anything. Okay, so suppose right now we have in traffic lights we have red signal, okay, which means stop. Suppose if we invert it, okay, suppose we say that no, green would be stop and red would be go. So I mean, red itself doesn't say that you have to stop, right? So this is how signs are developed, this is how meanings are generated. Okay, so basically deconstruction talks about that. It talks about this arbitrary relationship between the signifier and the signified. So Roland Barthes would be another important figure, and who says that so therefore the the author is dead. Okay, and my teacher, actually I'm sorry, I don't remember the the exact names and stuff, but when I studied this, my teacher gave me an example that one day this was this gentleman was presenting a paper on a text, okay, on a book. Now one gentleman from the audience, he suddenly stood up and said that no, that interpretation is wrong. So the paper presenter, he said that why, I mean, who are you, who are you to say that? He says that because I am the author. So the paper presenter says that, so what? Okay, so what? Because the fact that you are an author does not mean that you will have the last say when vis-a-vis its meanings. Okay, so Barthes was actually talking about that. He says that the reader or listener or the spectator, they are supposed to interpret it, okay, independently of any supposed authorial intention. because the text is just a free play of science within language. And as a reader, you are free to interpret that. And in fact, if you are, suppose I'm giving you two examples, say Paradise Lost and Merchant of Venice. Okay, in Merchant of Venice, suppose, I hope that you're familiar with the story. Shylock, okay, is a character which was portrayed as, somebody who's a kind of a villain kind of a thing. Okay, he's not supposed to be we're not supposed to empathize or sympathize with the character. Okay, same with but now come to 20th century and 21st century, we actually see Shylock as a tragic character. Okay, so the interpretation has changed. In Paradise Lost, Satan. Okay, so once again, we now see him as a tragic character almost. So the interpretation of a text can change. It does not depend on, it doesn't really matter what the author had intended. Okay, so and of course, the interpretation, we are talking about interpretation, that will depend on discourses, and discourse will depend on power. Okay, so discourse are basically set of ideas which are dominant. Okay, so Foucault would say that discourses involve politically contentious activities, not just because of the certainty with which they describe and define people, but because such discourses at the same time express the political authority of their users. So which means that, in any interpretation of anything in a given period will depend on, the hegemonic group, the group which is in power at that point in time. That will determine what would be the description, what would be the interpretation of a particular thing. Okay, so another important figure would be Lyotard, okay, who basically attacks, two primary narratives. Number one, the progressive emancipation of humanity. So from Christian redemption to Marxist utopia, everything he says, they are just grand narratives, and therefore, they don't exist. Okay, they don't make any sense. And of course, science. Okay, he would say that science is nothing but, they are also, scientists are also storytellers. Science doesn't give us objective truth. Okay, as we are discussing, it is also relative. Even the rules of physics, they will be applicable only in a given circumstances. Suppose, take for example, in a black, in a front of a black hole, all the, rules of physics as we know it will not work there. Okay, so well, so because, I think we have limited time, so I'm just browsing through it quickly. So Frederick Jameson would be another important figure in the postmodernism discourse. He would say that modernity, it says the truth can be discovered by accessing the right channels of knowledge to arrive at structural and material basis, whereas postmodernity, it says the notions of truth are culturally and historically relative constructions. Okay, so Frederick Jameson is actually an immensely, influential figure in postmodernism. He also talks about the system of capitalism. Okay, so the systems of capitalism, which kind of, forms a very integral part of postmodernist discourse. So therefore, what we have is that, everything is constructs. They are nothing but constructs. Okay, so this skepticism that objective knowledge is not possible, reason is socially constituted. Okay, progress is once again subject to skepticism. Ideas of binaries like truth, untruth, good, evil, right, wrong, they can be questioned. Okay, idea of self can also be questioned. Okay, idea of reality is mediated by your concepts. Other concepts like language, gender, concepts, differences, these are just but social constructs. Okay, so yeah, so this is where ultimately we come to. Okay, so therefore the objective truth, there is only one objective truth, which is that there is no objective truth. Okay, so that, as I said in the beginning as well, that itself is a paradox, right? So we'll be talking about after this, some aspects of literature. But ma'am, how much time do we have? Could you please tell me? For the lecture and before the question answer session begins, is it almost time? Do we have around 10 minutes or so?
Yes,
Yeah,
sir.
you can, sir. You can please,
Yes, sir.
please
Okay.
carry on.
Okay. Thank you. So I'll be just, so saying this, I'll be just moving into literature for a while, okay, and we'll see that how these discourses, they figure in literature and how the literary techniques they kind of, display these belief, these philosophies. But although these are so fractured and so varied that even postmodern literature is something which is very very different, difficult to determine, okay, very very difficult to define. So these are the some features which we can see okay in postmodern literature, but once again remember these are not, postmodernism is not just limited to these, okay, because this kind of gives rise to so many varied forms that we can just go on and on. So I'm not reading this slide. I'll just quickly move to the next one, which talks about gives you some idea about this definition, these several genres, this several aspects of postmodern literature, and of course some examples. So as you can see there, irony, because there's always a difference between appearance and reality. Okay, therefore irony becomes a very very important postmodernist feature. Catch 22 by Joseph Heller would be a prime example of that. Playfulness, dark humor, because that is one important aspect, because in modernism we have this angst that okay, something is wrong with the world and we are really tensed about it. But postmodernism say, since you cannot help it, just celebrate that. It celebrates the anarchy. It doesn't mourn the anarchy, rather it celebrates it. Okay, so this playful nature is one of the important feature here. The crying of Lot 49, as you can see here on your screen, that could be one example of such playfulness. Intertextuality, okay, because it says that literary work is not something which is original. Okay, it is just a part of the broad literary discourse and overview. So therefore every literature can refers to other. Okay, so the Name of the Rose, or Don Quixote, not by Cervantes, but as you can see here, Kathy Acker. Don Quixote is actually one of the famous and very favorite kind of of postmodernist it would seem, because there are several books which have been which refer to Don Quixote, okay, in their intertextuality. So pastiche would be another feature of postmodernism, which basically refers to a work of art that imitates the style of character of one or more artists. Okay, but unlike parody, pastiche celebrates that particular work of art. It does not mock. Okay, so Handmaid's Tale, for example, it's a kind of amalgamation of several kind of genres. Okay, so as you can see here, the story of Heathcliff's journey, back to Wuthering Heights. Okay, so of course it talks about the famous novel Wuthering Heights. It refers to that. It refers to Heathcliff, the character of Heathcliff. Okay, so once again, example of pastiche. Metafiction, something which I was talking about a while back, and French Lieutenant Someone, for example, it gives you multiple endings. Okay, Italo Calvino, it once again it talks about a novel where the reader itself is reading the text of the same name. Okay, so beyond metafiction is something which self-reflexive in nature. Okay, which draws the artifact of metafiction, it draws attention to the fact that yes, this is a work of art. Okay, fabulation would be another one, which encompasses storytelling including fantastical elements such as magic and myth, closely related to magic realism, of course. Okay, and we have Harun and CF series by Salman Rushdie, Gabriel Garcia Marquez's 100 Years of Solitude. Those would be some examples. Temporal distortion would be another thing which refers to fragmentation and Londonian narratives. The Children's Crusade, that could be one example of such. Technoculture, okay, which refers to the interactions between and politics of technology and culture. Hyper reality, we have already talked about it. Okay, White Noise is a a novel once again by Don DeLillo. We basically talks about so for example, the reality that we observe in a TV screen. Okay, so those things are very become very very popular in postmodernism. Paranoia, fragmentation, those would be other characteristics. Okay, because this distrust of fixity. Okay, so that kind of gives rise to paranoia. All right. Fragmentation is once again, various elements concerning plot, characters, themes. So this entire world is fragmented, and that is once again reflected, in literature. Breakfast of Champions. Here the protagonist discovers that everybody is a robot. Okay, burning himself. So once again, as I said, refers to this kind of stuff. So now, well, we have come to the fag end of the presentation. Now, I'm sorry, I actually had to go through rush through the some of the slides, because once again, because of the paucity of time. But I hope you understand, how those discourses, they actually got reflected in literature, and if you have read certain postmodern texts, you'll be able to relate to this. But just remember that these texts, they may observe all these characteristics, some of the characteristics of postmodernism. They may not observe any of these characteristics, and still may be a postmodern text. Okay, so they are so varied in form that it's actually difficult to pinpoint like that. Okay, so we have come to almost, as I said, the fag end of the presentation. So if we talk about the critique of postmodernism, okay, so we can mention a few points. Number one would be that, well, we have learned that, okay, reality is mediated, fine, accepted. But what about the object? Okay, what about the objects themselves? They are not figments of imagination. Okay, those are not concepts. Suppose you are watching a cyclone. Okay, you cannot just say, oh, it's a fragment of imagination, forget about it. It's just a concept. Okay, you are walking on a road, you see a lamppost. Okay, you cannot say, oh, it's nothing, it's just a social construct. Okay, you just go ahead and wham. Okay, you will understand that, no, it's pretty much real. So that is how critics have pointed out postmodernism's inability to explain these concepts, these objects. Okay, but once again, in defense of postmodernism, it is not actually concerned about that. It is not about the physical object. Okay, it refers to the social constructs, things which are social constructs. Okay, so there is also a crushing sense that there is nothing new to create. So in a way, postmodernism is both playful as well as very gloomy, because there is nothing you can do. There is nothing you can, create. There is, it's ultimate at helpless anarchy that we are in. Okay, so if there is nothing new to create, what are you doing then? Okay, so that would be, another limitation. There is also this focus on dystopian narratives. So without suggested avenues for avoiding dystopia. So postmodernism gives you problems, but it doesn't ever give you solutions. Okay, so how do we survive with problems? Okay, what are we supposed to do? Till modernism, you still had something, okay, you have to move in this direction. But in postmodernism, everything is denied. So if you deny everything, then what is it that you are ultimately left with? Okay, it is also self-contradictory at spaces, and we have already talked about it, for a while. So postmodernists, they argue, they support their theories and position with arguments. Whatever I am doing so far, it is just argument. These are just arguments. But if logic is a tool of operation, isn't it hypocritical in a way? Okay, so this is just logic, as Foucault has said, any discourse is just, is meant for, is political in nature, and therefore it oppresses. Okay, so isn't it hypocritical in a way? Once again, if every discourse is a tool of operation, is not postmodernism itself a tool of operation then? Because postmodernism is also a discourse. It is also motivated by, social, change and agenda and social reality. So in dismantling structures, doesn't it create other structures? Okay, so as I was saying, in the beginning, that this truth, this statement that every objective truth is relative, isn't this itself an objective statement? Okay, which once again can be questioned, right? So these are some questions which I would like to leave you with. But before that, just see the picture that is there on your right. It says we have I don't know whether you can read the line at the bottom. It says we have already done this room. I remember that fire extinguisher. So basically these two ladies, they are watching an exhibition of postmodernist art. They all look the same and very confusing. So therefore they say, I just remember this fire extinguisher. Okay, that is how we can, actually distinguish it. Okay, so this is another aspect. It is so difficult at times that, it is so difficult to pinpoint. That has also been kind of, attacked by critics. So therefore, you have, we can, and yes, there is another point that, if reason is just a tool of operation, as we have seen, okay, then if you and I disagree on some point, we have nothing to talk about. Okay, because we cannot use our reason to settle our differences. Reason is something which doesn't exist, it's just a social construct. Okay, so there is no objective truth for us even to be right or wrong about. So nothing is true and nothing is wrong. Then what do we do? Okay, so as Nietzsche said that, where is no truth, there is only power. Okay, so if nothing is truth in this world, then whoever has the power, he or she determines what the truth is. Okay, so ultimately any discussion on postmodernism, doesn't it become, just a self-referential and, a maze like of a thing. Okay, so therefore several critics, recent critics in the 21st century, they have talked about a concept, of postmodernism. Okay, and once again, there are several concepts. Remember, these are very new. Okay, these are just in the, as I said, 21st century concepts. So these haven't yet, taken any shape as of yet. But yes, there are several thinkers like Mikhail Epstein, for example. He believed that postmodernism will eventually become conventional and provide the foundation for a new non-ironic poetry, which he described as trans-postmodernism. Okay, so this frustration with postmodernism, this frustration, that we cannot really determine what postmodernism is, that kind of, gives rise to these aspects. Alan Carey, once again, he talks about pseudo-modernism. Okay, so where we have just, and this is very relatable. He says that in pseudo-modernism, one phones, clicks, presses, surfs, chooses, moves, downloads. So this, the cyber activities, this is online activities, he refers to that. Once again, there is this aspects of meta-modernism as well. Okay, and post-millennialism as well. Okay, so all these concepts, I mean, they are just nothing but this difficulty, as I said, with postmodernism being a linear movement. You cannot really determine, you cannot really define postmodernism. Okay, so these are the movements which kind of, have kind of arose lately, and as I said, these are yet to take shape. And these are so varied in a way that you cannot really pinpoint these as well. Okay, so so yeah, so therefore postmodernism often, critics say that it is dead because it has actually failed to address human needs. It just problematizes everything. Okay, and doesn't give you an answer. But once again, just remember that seeing from another angle, isn't that the only truth? Okay, we just have, because everything is actually subjective. Okay, any attempt at discovering any kind of truth can only result in creating, another structure which can be questioned. Okay, so once again, to refer back to this, Hegel, once again, is everything about then thesis, antithesis, and synthesis, and the cycle goes on and on. Okay, and postmodernism actually refers to this aspect. So anyway, I'll just stop here because I'm sure I have I don't know I have whether I have overstepped the time or not, but yeah, so I'll stop my presentation. Yes, so this would be it from my side as of now, and I hope that, I don't know, but I hope you have at least I mean, got some idea of it, especially students I'm talking about, and I hope that it helps you to kind of understand, perceive postmodernism and our contemporary reality, more importantly, in a better way. So yes, ma'am, over to ma'am. I mean, that would be it for my side as of now.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for that overwhelming, and it was very informative, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Any questions? There is a Q&A session. Any questions from the audience you like to ask, sir, or any? You can ask.
I know I didn't just see the chats here. I'm sorry. I just presenting, so I could not see it. All right. Okay. So I hope you could see it at the last, because I'm sorry I about this technical issue. Maybe could be some internet issues, and then this notifications. I'm sorry about that. So
Any questions that you want to ask the audience? Audience, you can ask, sir. He's ready to answer. Any questions?
Sir, could you please elaborate temporal distortion, sir?
temporal distortions, yes. Actually, it just plays with the time in the narrative. There could be once again several manifestations of that, but I mean, just time itself is questioned, as we are talking about relativity. And similarly, the time in a narrative, the narrative that has been questioned. Okay. And so it basically presents a fractured narrative of time. Okay. So there is no beginning, middle, and end. All right. Actually, it would be very interesting to note, because I have consciously kind of left out other manifestations in postmodernism, but it would be very easy to explain. Suppose if you think about a movie like Inception, okay, where everything, this reality, time, everything has been questioned. Okay, it would be a fine example of postmodernist art. Okay, so once again, as I said, I have skipped those things, but that would be I think because the narratives, if you talk about literature, those are rare. Okay, so I cannot really I don't think there is a common text which all of us have read in that sense. But to put it simply, yes, the narrative questions the linear journey of time. Okay, linear aspects of time, that is temporal distortions in narrative.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Any other questions you like to ask, sir?
There are questions in chat box, sir.
Okay.
Deborah just asked, postmodernism is reality having an existential crisis.
uh, Sorry, postmodernism, could you please repeat that?
Postmodernism is reality having an existentialism crisis. Sorry, existential crisis.
Yes, actually, yes, it kind of, if I have understood the question correctly, I mean, yes, it derives from that, as I was saying, the existentialist philosophies. And that, yes, that in a way definitely manifests, I mean, our idea of reality, because what is our reality? Okay. And actually, I did not, mention it, the Second World War, the atomic bomb, those were of course fundamental, in change. I mean, it's a watershed movement, or a moment almost in history. It brings into question our existence, and what does this mean, and it can just go out at any point. It's basically meaningless. So yeah, so that is definitely one of the thing. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. There's one more question from Anupam, sir. How
Mhm.
can we locate postmodernism in this present era in 2021, especially in the era of digital humanities and medical humanities? Can we say this is a postmodernism?
Yeah, actually, so I mean, see, uh, digital humanities and medical humanities, definitely, because once again we have talking about, like, stuff like Neurolinks and all the stuff, where in fact the the cyprog, something which actually I haven't mentioned in my presentation, but where you can actually combine our human aspects with technology. Okay. So things are, we do not know, I mean, where in next 10-15 years would be very interesting, if we survive this pandemic, and this is going to be very interesting, because the way we are going, and everything can be perhaps replaced. So ultimately it will be difficult to you're talking about medical humanities, and it will be very difficult to I mean, determine what is human and what is non-human, what is technical. So in that sense, so and yes, digital humanities is another case where everything, actually, it has already become postmodernism. Actually, if you talk about digital humanities, it has been there for a while now. And all these aspects of I mean, I mean, it's a part of this, discourse of hyper reality in a way. It stems from that, of course. Goes into a different level altogether. But yes, you can say postmodernism, but then again, postmodernism is also, if you define that, then once again it defeats the purpose. Okay, postmodernism one way, refers to the failure of postmodernism to define something, because postmodernism, perhaps in its attempt to deconstruct everything, ultimately ends up defining something, and that is what, that is why postmodernism has come up. So possibly, yes, it will, we can maybe after a few years, I mean, down the line, we'll understand that what is, postmodernism, because you always need some, distance, temporal distance, in order to understand an era. So some would say that no, we are still in the era of postmodernism. So whether postmodernism or postmodernism, but these things are definitely, part of this larger narrative that we are talking about. Yes.
Sir, your personal idea on what do you think about postmodernism being dead, the deliberation that's going on right now?
Okay, the postmodernism would be, I don't know, postmodernism would really vehemently disagree with that. I would say that there is nothing personal, and as I was explaining, that all perceptions, all whatever we think as personal is actually, we are socially programmed. Okay, so maybe I am also made to think the way that I'm thinking. But well, if you are talking about that, maybe, I would say it's very difficult. It's very difficult to determine that whether it's a, because it's almost like theory. Even with literary theory, there is a similar discourse that whether theory is dead, whether theory has failed. Okay, it is just both postmodernism and theory, they are, almost of similar in nature, and they have came up they actually came up in a similar time. 1980s, 60s would be postmodernism, and then after 1980s would be theories. And they are just tools, they are just discourses. So personally, I would say, there is nothing like failure or success in that sense. But it actually refers to our existence. It actually helps us to understand our existence in a better way. Okay, once again, if there is anything such as understanding, okay, whether we can at all understand anything, okay, that could be another question. But yes, postmodernism kind of helps us to perceive, and maybe after, when we are done with getting confused and stuff, we'll realize that yes, whatever postmodernism implies, despite the sheer difficulty of understanding, it actually, it actually makes sense, I mean, to me. I mean, once again, it's a personal comment, but it actually makes sense. Okay, so whether be it postmodernism or postmodernism, okay, they all refers to a reality. They arise out of our social reality in a way, and they refer to the contemporary time in a way. So from me, yes, it definitely helps to kind of understand our reality in a way. Okay, but once again, that can be questioned always.
Any other question? One more question from audience side.
Okay. Is Okay, is there any other question in the chat box?
No, sir.
Okay, okay, all right.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for patiently answering all the questions asked by the audience. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Now, Ms. Shashireka will will be closing with her vote of thanks. Over to Shashi, ma'am. Shashireka, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Thank you, sir. Good morning, all. As all good things come to an end in life, so is the literature webinar. I, on behalf of Department of English, Dr. MGR Educational and Research Institute, I take this opportunity to propose vote of thanks to those who have attended this webinar on postmodern philosophy and literature, organized by our institute. At the outset, I thank our chief guest and resource person, Mr. Tanmay Puttanunda. The way he explained the topic is exclam- explanatory, and that we really enlightened with your literature knowledge and presence. We are thankful to our Honorable Presidents, Engineer ACS Arun Kumar Sir and Registrar Dr. Palnivelu Sir, Joint Registrar Dr. D.P. Jabaraj Sir, Humanities and Science Joint Registrar Dr. Molani Pandey Ma'am, Professor and Dean Pushkala Ramani Ma'am, Literature Association Emeritus and Department of English Dean, Professor and Dean Mary Thomas Ma'am, and that for their motivation, I would like to thank our head of the department, English, Dr. M. Chandrasena Rajeshwaran ma'am, for her enthusiastic support. A special thanks to the organizing committee, teaching faculty for their unflinching support and coordination. Our heartfelt thanks to our students for active participations. With these warm words and a kind message, we move to the end of the today's webinar. Thank you, sir. Thank you all.
Thank you, Shashina. The feedback link will be is shared by ma'am in the chat box. You can fill it, and you will receive a certificate with, okay. Kindly fill the feedback link that is being posted in the chat box, okay, and wait for a day to receive your certificate. Okay, start filling your form, filling the feedback forms. Thank you.
I think we have come to the end of the session. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much, Mr.
Thank you,
Puttananda,
ma'am.
for your excellent presentation on the topic. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Ma'am, Shashi ma'am, you can stop the recording, ma'am. Students you are supposed to fill the feedback link that has been posted in the chat box, okay, and you will receive a certificate within a day, okay.